My parents mocked my small apartment until they needed a place to stay. I was making coffee when my phone rang. It was my mother. I hesitated before answering. For the last 3 years, our conversations lasted 2 minutes at most, always filled with criticism disguised as concern. Hello? Sarah, dear. Her voice sounded different, less haughty, almost fragile. How are you? Fine, Mom. And you guys? A heavy silence filled the line. I heard my father cough in the background. Actually, Sarah, we need to talk to you in person. Can we come over this afternoon? My apartment, the same 485 square foot apartment they had ridiculed at my housewarming party 3 years ago. The apartment my mother described as an expensive shoebox, and my father compared to a closet with ambitions. Sure, I replied, too curious to refuse. Is 4 o'clock good? I hung up and looked around my little sanctuary. Every inch of that space had been earned with my own sweat. I worked as an administrative assistant during the day and as a bartender 3 nights a week for 2 years to save up for the down payment. When I finally got the keys, I cried alone in the empty living room, feeling for the first time in my life that I had something that was truly mine. My parents didn't understand, or rather, they chose not to. At the housewarming party, Mom ran her fingers over the kitchen counter with a grimace. Well, at least it's clean. Though I can't imagine preparing Thanksgiving here. Where would you put the turkey? Dad was more direct. He laughed when he saw my bedroom, which, I admit, barely fit my double bed and a nightstand. Is this a bedroom or a walk-in closet? Sarah, you could have stayed at home and saved all this money. Staying at home meant living under their roof, following their rules, listening to constant comparisons with my older sister, Jennifer, who had married a surgeon and lived in a 4-bedroom house in Connecticut. Jenny never had to move into a place like this, my mother whispered to my aunt that night, loud enough for me to hear. She waited until she could have something decent. Decent. That word echoed in my head for weeks. But I loved my apartment. I loved waking up without hearing comments about my clothes, my career, my choices. I loved cooking at midnight if I wanted to. I loved the silence that was mine, not the judgment-laden silence of my parents' house. For the next 3 years, they rarely visited. They'd call occasionally, always with the same script. How's your tiny job? Still in that apartment? Jennifer just had her pool redone. I stopped sharing my victories. When I received a significant promotion at work, I didn't tell them. When I managed to fully furnish my apartment without any debt, I kept it to myself. When I finally felt happy and at peace, I learned not to seek their validation. And now, out of the blue, they wanted to talk. I spent the afternoon cleaning, not because the place needed it, but because I needed to do something with my restless hands. I fluffed the sofa cushions, arranged the magazines on the coffee table, lit a scented candle. At 4 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I almost didn't recognize them. My father, always so imposing in his impeccable suits, was wearing faded jeans and a wrinkled jacket. My mother, who never left the house without perfect makeup, was pale, with deep dark circles under her eyes. "Hi," I said, confused. "Come in." They entered slowly, almost hesitantly. Mom looked around with an expression I couldn't decipher. It wasn't the disdain from before. It was something closer to regret. "Have a seat," I gestured to the sofa. "Want some coffee? Water?" "Water would be great, dear," Dad said quietly. As I filled 2 glasses in the kitchen, I heard my mother whisper something to my father. He replied in a tired tone, "We have no choice, Linda." I returned with the glasses and sat in the armchair across from them. The silence was thick, heavy with unspoken things. "So," I began, "what's going on?" My father cleared his throat. My mother stared at her own hands. "Sarah," he started, we're in some trouble. financial trouble. My heart sped up, but I kept my expression neutral. Trouble? Serious trouble, Mom added, her voice cracking. Very serious. And then they told me, and with every word, my 485 square foot apartment, my little shoebox, my closet with ambitions, began to feel much larger than the 4-bedroom house in Connecticut they so admired. To understand how we got here, I need to go back to the beginning, to the house where I grew up, to the family Sundays, to the comparisons that shaped who I became. I was born 2 years after Jennifer, and from day one, it was clear who the favorite was. Not in a cruel or obvious way, my parents were never monsters, but there was a subtle, constant difference in how they treated us. Jennifer was the smart one. I was the hardworking one. Jennifer was naturally talented. I was persistent. When she got an A, it was because she was brilliant. When I got an A, it was because I studied too hard. Sarah is so dedicated, my mother used to say to her friends, as if dedication were a consolation prize for a lack of real talent. I grew up believing it, believing that I had to work twice as hard to get half the recognition, and that's exactly what I did. In college, while Jennifer studied medicine at an expensive private university that my parents paid for in full, I got a partial scholarship to a state university and worked 3 different jobs to cover the rest. I served coffee, babysat, did audio transcriptions. I slept 4 hours a night for 4 years. When I graduated, my parents came to the ceremony. We took pictures, we had dinner afterward, but in the car on the way back, I heard my mother say to my father, "At least she finished. I was worried she'd give up with all that pressure she put on herself." No, we're proud of you. No, you accomplished something amazing. Just relief that I hadn't given up. 2 years later, Jennifer married David, the surgeon. It was a 200-person wedding at a venue in Martha's Vineyard. My parents paid for everything. $80,000, I later found out. A $5,000 dress, $8,000 in flowers, a live band, a 5-course menu. I was the maid of honor, of course. I smiled in the photos, I danced at the reception, and when my mother hugged me, teary-eyed, saying, "One day it'll be your turn, dear," I swallowed the question I wanted to ask. Are you going to pay for mine too? The answer came 6 months later when I casually mentioned I was dating someone seriously. "Oh, that's nice, Sarah, but don't rush things, okay? You have time, and these things are expensive." I got the message. It was around that time I decided I needed to move out. I was 24, living in my parents' basement to save money, but really, I was paying the price with my sanity. I started looking for apartments. Nothing too big. I knew my limits. A small place, but mine. A space where I could breathe. When I finally found the apartment on Oak Street, it was love at first sight. It was small, yes. The living room and kitchen were practically the same room. The bedroom barely fit a bed. The bathroom was so tight you'd hit your elbow on the wall while brushing your teeth. But it had huge east-facing windows, so the morning sun flooded everything with golden light. The building was old but well-maintained. The neighborhood was safe and full of little cafes and bookstores. And the price, $1,200 a month, was exactly what I could afford if I kept my 2 jobs. "I'll take it," I told the realtor on the spot. When I told my parents, the reaction was predictable. "How much is the rent?" my father asked, his eyes wide. $1,200. For a 1-bedroom apartment? Technically, it's a studio, but it has a... "Sarah," my mother interrupted, "that's insane. You'll be throwing money away. Why don't you stay here another year or 2, save up, and then buy something real?" "I want my own space now." "Space?" Dad laughed. "From what you've described, you'll have less space than your room here." "But it will be mine." My mother sighed, that long, tired sigh she always gave when I disappointed her. "Fine, Sarah, it's your life. Just don't come asking to borrow money when you realize you can't keep up. I won't have to, I replied, my jaw tight. And I didn't. I worked like a dog, saved every penny, cut every superfluous expense. In 3 months, I had saved up the security deposit, first month's rent, and money for basic furniture. The day I signed the lease, I sat on the floor of the empty apartment and cried. I cried with relief, with pride, with exhaustion. I cried because, for the first time, I felt like I had proven something, not to them, but to myself. The housewarming party was 3 weeks later. I invited family and a few close friends. I spent days preparing food, decorating, wanting everything to be perfect. My parents arrived late. Jennifer and David didn't even show up, some excuse about a hospital event. And then came the slaughter, disguised as concern. Hey, for those of you listening right now, I know many of you have been through this. You've heard those phrases that pretend to be advice, but are actually stabs of judgment. If you've ever felt like your accomplishments were never enough for someone, leave a comment below. I want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you're enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel because there's still a lot more to come. And look, it's going to be intense. The next 3 years were the best of my life, and also the loneliest. My parents practically disappeared. They'd call on my birthday, Christmas, Thanksgiving, always with the obligatory invitation to dinner at their house, where I was invariably asked how things were going, in a way that made it clear they expected things to be going poorly. "Still managing to pay the rent?" Dad would ask, grabbing more mashed potatoes. "Yep, no problem." He'd exchange a look with my mother, that look that said, "For now." Jennifer was always there, of course, with David by her side, the two of them making the perfect couple. She started working part-time at an elite pediatric clinic. David did a fellowship in cardiac surgery. They bought an even bigger house, 5 bedrooms, a pool, a 3-car garage. "You have to come see it," my mother would say excitedly. "It's absolutely stunning. The kitchen has a double island. Double, Sarah! And the master suite has separate closets for each of them." "That's nice," I'd reply, pushing the turkey around my plate. "You should visit Jennifer more. She always asks about you." A lie. Jennifer never asked about me, nor I about her. We had developed a cordial relationship of sisters who tolerate each other at mandatory family events. But I was fine, genuinely fine. I got the promotion I mentioned, from administrative assistant to project coordinator, with a 40% salary increase. I was able to quit the bartending job. For the first time in years, I had free nights and entire weekends to myself. I redecorated my apartment. I bought plants that filled the windows with green. I painted one wall navy blue. I hung art that I loved, not what my mother would approve of. I made friends in the building. I met Marcus, who lived in 3B and worked as a graphic designer. He taught me how to bake bread. I met Elena from 2C, a nurse who worked night shifts and always knocked on my door at 6 in the morning asking for coffee and company. My tiny apartment transformed into something I never had in my parents' spacious house, a home. Meanwhile, without my knowledge, my family's perfect life was quietly falling apart. Apparently, my father had made some risky investments, very risky. He was always the type who believed he knew better than the experts. He refused financial advisors, despised conservative strategies. "You don't get rich by being careful," he used to say. For years, that arrogance worked, or seemed to. He earned a good living as a regional manager for a tech company. Mom had inherited money from her parents. They lived comfortably, a 3-bedroom house in a posh Boston suburb, 2 new cars, annual trips to Europe. But then came the wrong bet. Dad invested heavily in a cryptocurrency startup, not a little. A lot. He convinced a few friends to invest too, assuring them it was the opportunity of the century. The startup went bankrupt in 18 months. It took everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. The savings, the retirement fund, even part of my mother's inheritance that he had temporarily invested without telling her. Mom found out when she tried to withdraw money and saw the account nearly empty. "What did you do?" she screamed, according to what I was told later. "Where is our money?" Dad tried to downplay it, tried to promise he'd get it all back, tried to blame the market, the economy, bad luck. But numbers don't lie. They had lost over $300,000. Still, they tried to keep up appearances. They cut back on spending discreetly. They canceled the trip to Italy, claiming Dad was too busy at work. They stopped dining out so frequently. "We're just being more mindful," Mom would tell her friends. But the bills kept coming. The mortgage, the car payments, the credit cards they used to cover their lifestyle while the money vanished. And then came the final straw. My father lost his job. The company went through a restructuring. It cut senior managers whose salaries were high. They offered a severance package, but it was nowhere near enough to cover the financial hole they were in. Dad was 58. In a market that values youth and energy, he discovered he wasn't as valuable as he thought. He tried to hide it from everyone. He'd leave the house every day in a suit, as if going to work. He'd spend his days in libraries, cafes, sending out resumes that rarely got a response. 3 months, 6 months, a year, nothing. The savings ran out, the credit cards maxed out, the mortgage was late. Once, twice, 3 times, the bank sent the first notice. That's when they called Jennifer. "Dear," Mom said, her voice trembling, "we're going through a rough patch. Temporary, of course, but we need help. Could you and David lend us $30,000 just until your father gets another job?" There was a long silence on the line. "Mom," Jennifer finally said, "David and I talked about this. We can't." "What do you mean you can't? You have that huge house." "Which is mortgaged, Mom, and David still has medical school loans. And we're trying for a baby, so we're saving for fertility treatments. We just don't have that kind of money available." A lie, at least partially, but also self-preservation. Jennifer wasn't stupid. She knew that lending to her parents meant never seeing that money again. Mom cried after hanging up. Dad punched a wall. And then, with no other options, they did the one thing they swore they'd never do. They called me. Sitting on my sofa, my parents looked like ghostly versions of their former selves. Dad, who always sat up straight with that military posture he cultivated, was slumped over, his shoulders drooping. Mom, who always spoke with that annoying confidence, could barely look me in the eye. "How long?" I asked, after they finished explaining. "How long have you been in this situation?" "1.5 years, Dad admitted. Maybe a little more." 1.5 years. All that time, they kept calling me to ask if I was managing to pay rent, kept making comments about my small apartment, kept praising Jennifer's house. "And Jennifer can't help?" I tried to keep my voice neutral. "She said she can't afford to," Mom replied quickly. "And we understand. She and David have their own expenses." Of course, Jennifer had 5 bedrooms and a double island in her kitchen, but she couldn't help her parents. "And you're coming to me because you're our daughter," Dad said, his voice laden with an emotion I'd never seen in him before. "And because we're desperate, Sarah. We're going to lose the house. The bank has started foreclosure proceedings." "How much do you need?" $30,000, Mom whispered, "to cover the arrears and give us a cushion while your father finds a job." $30,000. It was exactly what I had saved. Every penny of my emergency fund, painstakingly built over 3 years of double shifts and sacrifices. "We'll pay you back," Dad added quickly, "as soon as I get a job. With interest even. You have my word." My word. The same words he used when he promised his friends the crypto investment was a sure thing. And if you can't pay it back? Silence. "We will," Mom insisted. "Sarah, please, we're your family." Family. The word they used as a weapon when they needed something, but never as a shield when I needed them. "I need some time to think," I said. "Time?" Desperation tinged Dad's voice. "Sarah, we don't have time. The bank—" "I said I need to think," I cut in, more firmly. "This isn't a small decision." They left 20 minutes later, defeated. Mom hugged me at the door, a strange, awkward hug, full of a need she had never shown before. "Please, honey," she whispered in my ear, "don't let us lose everything." When the door closed, I sat on the floor and stayed there for an hour, just staring at the walls of my small apartment, my shoebox, my closet with ambitions. The apartment I got without their help, that I kept without their support, that I loved despite their contempt. I picked up the phone and called Elena. "I need some advice," I said when she answered. Half an hour later, she was in my living room with a bottle of wine and Marcus from 3B, whom she'd recruited on the way. I told them everything, every detail, from my childhood to that afternoon's visit. "So let me get this straight," Marcus said, pouring himself more wine. "They spent years belittling your achievements, comparing you to your sister, and mocking this apartment that you built with your own 2 hands, and now they want you to hand over your entire life savings to bail them out?" "Basically." "And your rich, favorite sister said no?" "She did." "Sarah," Elena leaned forward, "you know what I'm going to say. That I shouldn't lend them the money?" "That you can't lend them the money," she corrected. "It's not even a question of should. It's about your survival. That's your emergency fund. If you lose your job tomorrow, that's what keeps you afloat while you look for another. It's your safety net in a world with no guarantees." "But they're my parents," I argued, even though I knew she was right. "Who treated you like a second-class citizen your whole life," Marcus added gently. "Look, I'm not saying they're terrible people, but they made bad choices, choices you warned against, from what you've told me, and now they want you to bear the consequences of those choices." "Besides," Elena continued, "do you really think you'll ever see that money again? Your dad's been unemployed for a year, at 58. How long do you think it will take for him to find a job that pays enough to give you back $30,000? She was right. I knew she was. "But if I don't help, they'll lose their house." "And if you do help, you could lose your security," Elena countered. "Sarah, you worked like a slave for years to build this life, this apartment, these savings. You did it all by yourself, against all their expectations. Are you really going to throw it all away?" I spent the night sleepless, tossing and turning, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to help, not for them, but because the thought of my parents being homeless turned my stomach. But the other part, the part that remembered every condescending comment, every comparison to Jennifer, every time I felt invisible in my own family, that part whispered, "You owe them nothing." In the morning, I picked up my phone and typed a message in the family group chat. "Dad, Mom, Jennifer, we need to talk. All of us together. Dinner at your house Friday night. I'll give my answer then." Mom's reply came in seconds. "Of course, dear. What time?" Jennifer took longer. "I don't know if I can. David is on call." "I didn't ask if you can. I'm telling you that you need to be there," I replied. For the first time in my life, I was the one setting the terms. and Friday couldn't come soon enough. My parents' house felt different. It took me a few seconds to realize what it was. It was emptier. The expensive Persian rug that always decorated the living room was gone. The velvet curtains had been replaced with simple blinds. Small, empty spaces on the shelves indicated where decorative objects used to be. They were already selling things. "Sarah!" Mom greeted me at the door with a too-tight hug. "I'm so glad you came." Jennifer was already in the living room, sitting rigidly on the sofa. David hadn't come. No surprise there. Dad was in the kitchen, pretending to be busy with something in the oven. "Let's eat first," Mom announced with false cheerfulness. "I made lasagna, your favorite." It wasn't my favorite, it was Jennifer's, but I let it go. Dinner was a silent torture. Forks scraping against plates, uncomfortable chewing, Mom trying to make small talk that died after 2 sentences. "So, Sarah," Jennifer finally broke the silence, "Mom said you were going to give us an answer today?" Straight to the point, as always. "I am," I confirmed, wiping my mouth with a napkin. "But first, I have a few questions." Dad and Mom exchanged nervous glances. "Of course, dear," Dad said. "What do you want to know?" "How much exactly do you owe? Not just the mortgage, everything." The silence was deafening. "Sarah," Mom began, "we don't need to get into all the—" "How much?" Dad sighed heavily. $127,000. Jennifer gasped. I kept my expression neutral, even though my stomach had lurched. $127,000, I repeated. "And you think $30,000 is going to solve it?" "It will buy us time," Dad insisted, "to reorganize, renegotiate, find solutions." "What solutions? You've been unemployed for over a year. How many interviews have you had in that time?" "Sarah," Mom protested, "that's not how." "How many?" 17, Dad admitted, looking at his plate. "But how many offered you a job?" Silence. "None," he finally said. I looked at Jennifer, who was visibly uncomfortable. "And you, do you really not have $30,000, or do you just not want to lend it?" "Sarah, that's—" "Answer the question, Jen." She lifted her chin, defensive. "We have plans. We're saving for IVF treatments, remodeling the kitchen, and David is considering opening his own practice in 2 years. We can't compromise our future." "But I can compromise mine?" "It's not the same thing," she retorted. "You don't have kids planned. You don't have a house. You don't have—" "I don't have what, Jennifer? A life that matters?" "That's not what I said." "It's exactly what you meant." I took a deep breath, turning to my parents. "Do you know how much I make a month?" They both shook their heads. $4,200. "Do you know how much my rent is?" $1,200. That leaves $3,000 for food, transportation, bills, health insurance, and any emergencies. Out of that $3,000, I can save about $800 a month if I'm very careful. It took me 3 years to save $30,000. 3 years of working 2 jobs, eating instant noodles, no vacations, no new clothes. Mom started to cry silently. "And during those 3 years, did you once ask me how I was really doing, if I needed help, if I was happy?" "Sarah, we always worried," Dad started. "Lies." The word came out louder than I intended. "You worried about putting me down, about comparing my tiny apartment to Jennifer's giant house, about making me feel like my every accomplishment was insignificant. When I got that promotion, a 40% raise, Dad, I called to tell you. Do you know what you said?" He didn't answer. "That's nice. Jennifer just won an award from her medical association." "Not even a congratulations. Not a "we're proud," just another reminder that I would never be enough. "That's not fair," Jennifer interjected. "No one ever said you—" "You didn't have to say it. It was in every look, every silence, every time you talked about her and forgot about me." I turned to her. "And you. Do you know how many times you've called me in these 3 years? 4? 4 times, Jennifer. All on mandatory dates, my birthday and Christmas. 5-minute conversations full of, 'I'm in a hurry.' I'm busy, Sarah. I work, I have a house to take care of." "I work too. I have a house too. The difference is that no one ever validated my life the way they validated yours." The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the wall clock ticking. "So, what's your answer?" Dad finally asked, his voice broken. "Are you going to help or not?" I took an envelope out of my purse. I placed it on the table. "This is my answer." Mom opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single piece of paper, a letter I had written the night before. She read it aloud, her voice faltering. "Dear Mom and Dad, I've spent the last few days thinking a lot about your request. I consulted friends, did the math, weighed the options, and I've come to a conclusion. You're right about one thing. Family should support each other. So, here is my support. I am offering you my sofa bed. You can stay in my small apartment, the one you ridiculed so much, until you can get back on your feet. No rent, no deadline. Under a few conditions. 1, you sell the house now for whatever you can get. 2, you use the money to pay off as much debt as possible. 3, Dad accepts any job that comes along, no matter if it's beneath him. 4, Mom looks for work too. 5, you seek a professional financial advisor. I'm not offering money because I know I'll never see it back. Not out of malice, but out of reality. But I am offering a roof, food, and emotional support, the very things I had to build for myself because you never offered them to me. My apartment is 485 square feet. It will be cramped, uncomfortable, humiliating perhaps for you who have always had so much, but it's what I have. And it's more than you offered me when I was building my life. With love, yes, I still love you, even when you hurt me. Sarah." The silence that followed was as thick as concrete. Jennifer was the first to speak, her voice full of disbelief. "You're offering for them to live with you? In your apartment?" "It's what I can offer without destroying myself financially." "This is ridiculous," Jennifer exploded. "They can't live in a tiny apartment. Sarah, be reasonable." "Reasonable?" I turned to her slowly. "Reasonable is you, with 5 spare bedrooms, offering one to your own parents. But you didn't do that, did you? Because it would mess up your kitchen renovation plans." "It's not. It's exactly that, Jen. You don't want the inconvenience, but you think I should risk my entire future by handing over my life savings?" Mom was still holding the letter, tears falling onto the paper. "Sarah," she whispered, "we can't accept this. Living with you in that small space, being a burden?" "So that's your answer?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. "You'd rather lose everything and be on the street than accept help that's beneath your standards?" Dad ran a hand over his face. When he looked at me, there was something new in his eyes, something I had never seen before. Respect. "You're right," he said quietly, "about everything. We were terrible parents to you. We prioritized appearances over substance. We valued the daughter who gave us status over the daughter who had character." "Richard," Mom started to protest. "It's true, Linda, and you know it is." He looked at me. "Sarah, I don't know if we deserve your offer, but if you're still willing, we accept all conditions." "Dad," Jennifer stood up, "you can't be serious. Living in a 1-bedroom apartment?" It's a studio, I corrected, and yes, they can. If I could build a life there, they can rebuild theirs. Jennifer looked at me as if I were a stranger. Maybe I was. Maybe she had never really known me. "You're all crazy," she declared, grabbing her purse. "When you get tired of this fantasy, call me. But don't expect me to applaud this humiliation." She stormed out, slamming the door. The three of us were left, my broken parents, me, surprisingly, at peace. "When do you want to move in?" I asked. "The sooner, the better," Dad replied. "We need to put the house on the market this week." I nodded. "Okay, I'll get the apartment ready. You bring the essentials. No hoarding. Space is limited." Mom finally looked up at me. "Why are you doing this? After everything?" "Because someone needs to teach you what family really means, and apparently that person is me." Guys, if you've made it this far, take a deep breath with me, because I know many of you are feeling a mix of anger, satisfaction, sadness. I felt all of that too. And look, the story isn't over yet. There's still a lot to happen. If you're as invested in this story as I am in telling it, leave a comment telling me what you would do in my place. And subscribe to the channel, because the next chapters will show a transformation that no one expected, not even me. My parents moved in on a rainy Tuesday in October. They arrived with 3 suitcases, 2 boxes, and an expression of defeat that almost made me question my decision. Almost. "It's cozy," Mom said, looking around the apartment with an expression that was trying to be positive but failing miserably. "It's small," I corrected. "You don't have to pretend." I showed them where they would sleep, the sofa bed in the living room, which I had prepared with new sheets and extra blankets. My room, tiny as ever, would be my only private space. The bathroom is shared, obviously. I try to shower in the morning before work, so you have the rest of the day. The kitchen is for everyone. There's space in the fridge and cupboards. Dad just nodded, carrying the suitcases to a corner. "Sarah," he said after a long silence, "thank you. I know we don't deserve this." "No," I agreed, "but family isn't about deserving. It's about showing up, even when it's hard." The first week was strange. Waking up to find my parents asleep in the living room, hearing Mom crying softly at night when she thought no one was listening, watching Dad on the computer for hours looking for a job. Marcus and Elena were angels. They understood I needed space to process, but also escapes. Elena invited me to dinner at her apartment at least 3 times a week. Marcus would show up with coffee and talk about anything except my family situation. "How's it going?" Elena asked one of those nights, pouring wine. "Weird," I admitted. "It's like having roommates who are also my parents, who also hurt me deeply." "Are they actually looking for jobs?" "Dad is. He sent out 47 resumes this week. Mom is more resistant. She's never worked outside the home, and I think she's terrified." "And Jennifer?" "Not a single call. Nothing." But the town is small, and news travels. 2 weeks after the move, I ran into Aunt Helen at the supermarket. "Sarah," she hugged me tight. "I heard what you did, taking in your parents like that." News travels fast. "Your mother told me. Well, it's not easy for her, but I wanted you to know I'm proud of you. What you did takes a kind of strength that few people have." It was comforting, but also strange. Suddenly, I was the good daughter of the family, while Jennifer, perfect, successful, favorite Jennifer, was being seen as selfish. The real transformation began in the 3rd week. Dad got an interview, not for a management position. It was for a stock supervisor at a distribution company. It paid half of what he used to make. He was hesitant, clearly struggling with his ego. "You should go," Mom said softly the night before. It was the first time I'd heard her encourage him in weeks. He went, and he got the job. The night he got the news, he sat on the sofa bed and cried. Not from sadness, I realized, but from relief. I have a job, he kept repeating, as if he couldn't believe it. I can contribute. Dad, I sat beside him, you don't have to be ashamed. Honest work is honest work. I judged you for so long, he said, looking around the apartment. This place, your life, your choices. I thought I knew better. But you built something solid, while I built castles of cards that crumbled at the first gust of wind. It was the first real conversation we'd had in years. Mom took longer. She spent days just sitting, staring out the window. But slowly, I started to see her do small things. She'd organize the apartment, cook elaborate dinners, her way of contributing. She started taking care of my plants. They were a bit neglected, she said one day, almost as an apology. I know, I don't have a green thumb. I always liked gardening. Before. It was her who suggested, 3 weeks later, that she look for work at flower shops or garden centers. Do you think anyone would hire me? She asked, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. Mom, you're 55, not 95. Of course they will. She got a part-time job at a flower shop 3 blocks away 2 weeks later. The pay was modest, but I saw her smile when she came home on the first day. A customer asked me about orchids, and I knew all the answers, she recounted excitedly. She was so impressed she bought 3. It was strange seeing her proud of something so simple, but it was also beautiful. Meanwhile, Jennifer remained absent. No calls, no visits, no texts. It was as if we had ceased to exist. Until, 2 months after my parents moved into my apartment, she showed up. She knocked on the door on a Saturday afternoon. When I opened it, she looked different, less polished. Her red eyes suggested she had been crying. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I made room. Mom and Dad were on the sofa, watching a documentary. They both froze when they saw her. "Hi," Jennifer said awkwardly. I brought some things." She was holding 2 bags. "Winter clothes, some kitchen stuff you left behind." "Thank you, dear." Mom got up, clearly wanting to hug her, but unsure if she should. Jennifer put the bags on the floor, looking around. Her eyes landed on the sofa bed, on the 3 people sharing the space she had so ridiculed, on the apartment functioning as a real home. "How are you guys?" she finally asked. "Working," Dad answered. "Both of us. We're working and rebuilding." "That's good." She seemed genuinely surprised. "Want some coffee?" I offered, more out of politeness than desire. "No, I just came to drop this off." But she didn't move to leave. "Jen," Mom started carefully, "are you okay? You look—" "David wants to separate," she blurted out. The silence was absolute. "What?" Mom gasped. "He said that I've changed, that I've become cold, focused only on appearances. He asked why I didn't offer to let you stay at our house. He said he has 5 bedrooms and that his family would never let their parents go through this. We fought, a lot, and now he's sleeping in the guest room and talking about couples therapy or divorce." She finally broke down, crying while standing in the middle of the living room. Mom hugged her, Dad joined in, and I just watched, feeling a complex mix of satisfaction and pity. Because in the end, Jennifer had everything I never had: love, approval, resources. And she threw it away when her family needed her, while I, with my tiny apartment and insignificant life, was the only one who showed up. 6 months later, my apartment still housed 3 people, but it was a completely different place. Dad had been promoted to shift manager at the distribution company. It wasn't the glamorous executive position he had before, but he came home with stories about his team, proud of solving practical problems. His salary increased enough for him to start systematically paying off debts. Mom blossomed at the flower shop. She didn't just work there, she loved it. She started making custom arrangements that became popular. The shop owner offered to increase her hours. For the first time, I saw my mother have her own identity, not just as a wife and mother. And me? I learned to share my space. It wasn't easy. There were nights I wanted to scream, moments of friction over who left dishes in the sink or who used my expensive shampoo. But there were also breakfasts together, real conversations, genuine laughter. One night, while the three of us were making dinner in the tiny kitchen, Dad chopping vegetables, Mom seasoning the chicken, me making rice, Dad stopped and said, "You know, Sarah, this is the first time in decades I felt like part of a real family." "What do you mean?" I asked, stirring the rice. "In the big house, we lived separate lives. I worked late, your mother had social commitments, you girls had your own things. We had dinner together maybe twice a week. Here," he looked around the cramped apartment, "here we have no choice but to be present for each other." Mom took his hand. "I don't want the old house back," she said quietly. "I want this simplicity, this truth." Tears burned my eyes. All I ever wanted was exactly this, to be seen, to be present. Jennifer continued on her own journey. She and David didn't divorce, but they entered intensive therapy. She started visiting us regularly, not with pity, but with genuine curiosity about how we were doing. "You guys seem happy," she said on one of those visits, clearly confused. "We are," Dad replied simply, "for the first time in a long time." "But how? You lost everything." "No," Mom corrected gently, "we lost things. There's a difference." It was strange watching Jennifer process this, seeing her realize that maybe her priorities were backward, that maybe the huge house and the perfect life were empty if there was no real connection. She started showing up for dinners, helping with small things. One day, she brought boxes of expensive kitchenware she had duplicates of. "I thought you guys could use these," she said, avoiding my gaze. It wasn't an explicit apology, but it was a start. 3 months later, my parents had saved enough to start looking for their own apartment. Small, modest, but theirs. "We found a place," Dad told me one night. "1 bedroom, 5 blocks from here, $950 a month. We can sign the lease next week." I felt a strange pang in my chest. Relief? Sadness? Both? "That's great," I said sincerely. "You deserve your own space." "Sarah," Mom sat beside me, "we'll never forget what you did. You saved us, not just financially, but you saved us from ourselves." "You showed us what really matters," Dad added. "Not appearances, not status, but being present, being real." "And we're so sorry," Mom continued, tears rolling, "for all the years we didn't see you, didn't value you, for putting Jennifer on a pedestal and leaving you in the shadows." "You were always the strong one," Dad said. "We were just too foolish to see it." The three of us cried, huddled on the sofa bed that had been their bed for months. On the day they moved out, I helped carry boxes. Their apartment was simple, but Mom had already bought plants that filled the windows. Dad hung pictures with care, making every inch a home. "Dinner here next week," Mom offered. "I'll make real lasagna, your favorite." I smiled. She had finally paid attention. Back in my apartment, now mine alone again, I walked through the 485 square feet in silence. It was emptier, but somehow it felt bigger. Marcus knocked on the door an hour later with pizza and beer. "So, how does it feel to have your space back?" "Weird," I admitted. "Good, but weird." "You did an amazing thing, you know," Elena said, coming in behind him. "Not just taking in your parents, but transforming them." "I don't know if I transformed them. I think I just showed them a different path." You showed them that family isn't about big houses or money, it's about showing up when it counts. I looked around my apartment, my shoebox, my closet with ambitions, the place I built with hard work and determination, the place they mocked and ridiculed, the same place that saved my parents when they had nothing left. You know, I said slowly, when they mocked this apartment 3 years ago, I felt small, insignificant, like everything I'd achieved didn't matter. And now? Elena asked. Now I know it was never about the size of the space. It was about the size of the character. They had a huge house and even bigger egos. And when it all came crashing down, this little apartment was enough to hold all of us. Marcus raised his beer to small apartments and big hearts. To knowing what really matters, Elena added. We toasted in my 485 square foot apartment, which had been the stage for humiliation, redemption, healing, and transformation. And as the sun set outside the window, bathing everything in golden light, I realized something. I didn't need their validation to know my worth. I never did. But it was nice, after all these years, to finally have it. 6 months after that, Jennifer called me. Sarah, do you have time to talk? Sure. David and we have decided to sell the house, buy something smaller, more manageable, and, she hesitated, we're setting up a fund to help Mom and Dad and to pay you back for everything you sacrificed. Jen, you don't have to. I need to. You were right about everything, and I want to be the kind of person who shows up like you showed up. It wasn't perfect. Families never are. But it was real, honest, a beginning. And sometimes beginnings are all we need. I hung up the phone and looked around my apartment, my small, perfect, sufficient apartment, and I smiled.